There once was a young girl named Josephine who was habitually late for the Sunday morning Mass at her local church. She always forgot to set her alarm and wouldn't wake up in the time. Finally, she got tired of her parents always telling her off and decided that she would never be late for the Mass again. One Sunday morning, Josephine woke up at midnight, unaware of what time it was. She thought she had overslept again, and jumped right out of bed. She quickly got dressed and ran out the door without even ever looking at the clock. It was still dark outside, but it usually was dark at that time of year anyway. It was very quiet, and there was nobody else on the street. The only sound she could hear was the noise of her own footsteps on the pavement as she hurried towards the church. When she heard the church bell ring, she quickened her pace and took a shortcut through the cemetery. She got to the church just as service was about to begin. She found a seat and took a look around. Much to her surprise, she didn't recognize anyone. The church was filled with people she'd never seen before. They were all staring straight ahead in an eerie silence that hung over the gathering. The priest came out to celebrate Mass. Josephine realized that he was a stranger too. The priest told the congregation to pray for the soul of a young girl named Francine who had died the night before. Josephine was shocked. She knew Francine, and she had never even heard that the poor girl was ill. Something was radically wrong here. She began to feel very uneasy. She looked around again, and her eyes began to adjust in the dim light, and she saw someone she knew. There was an old woman sitting at the back of the church. Josephine's heart sank when she remembered the old woman that had died a year before. Looking towards the front of the church, she saw some people sitting there, looking very strange. Their skin seemed to be pearly white, and one of them turned his head. Josephine discovered to her horror that who was nothing but a skeleton in a suit. Just a skull and bones. This is a mass of the dead, thought Josephine. Everybody here is dead, except me, a specter mass. She noticed that some of them were staring at her. Their eyes were filled with anger, and it was clear to her that she had no business being here. Suddenly, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Nervously, she turned around and found her grandfather standing in the road behind her. He had been dead for 3 years until now. There was a worried look in his face, that at least what was left of it. He leaned towards her and whispered in his ear, "Leave right now, while you still can," he hissed. "You do not belong here." Josephine immediately grabbed her coat and walked quickly to the door. She heard the hollow footsteps echoing behind her and glanced back. The dead were rising out of their seats and following her. The faces were twisted in fury and hate. Josephine was terrified as she dashed for the door, a pack of shrieking ghosts snapping at their heels. She felt skeletal hands grabbing at her, trying to stop her from leaving. She twisted and turned, struggling to free herself from the grasp. Her coat was ripped off and her hat was snatched off her head, just as she managed to slip out the door. Screaming and crying, she almost fell out of her mind with fear. Josephine ran all the way home and told her parents what had happened. Later that day, some came to the house holding what was left of Josephine's coat and hat. It had been found in the cemetery. No one knew.